All right, hello to everybody that's entering. We're just wait a couple minutes while people start trickling in, and then we'll get started. In the meantime, we've got some tips on how to mute yourself if you're not familiar with Microsoft Teams. And if you're having issues either seeing the slides or with sound, like during the presentation, usually the best path forward is just to exit the meeting and then re-enter. Sometimes that's just like the magic trick that you need. All right. I'm just gonna get started since we have a little bit of a warm-up plan here. So hello, everybody, and welcome to our quarterly webinar series for the CDI Data Visualization Collaboration Area. I'm C. Nell, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm one of the coordinators of the CDI DataViz group. Again, here are just some tips for muting yourself if you're having any issues as we meet. Shortly, we're going to be hearing from Africa Flores-Anderson about her work using Earth observations for a sustainable future. But before we get started, we are going to do a short warm-up using live slide polling. And then after that, after the talk, we're going to follow up with a Q&A with Africa and a few announcements. So during the talk, please mute yourself so we're able to hear the speaker, and we'll go around and mute people as needed if there's any sort of like sound interruption. And during and after the talk, feel free to type any questions you have into the chat. We'll moderate the questions coming in, but you're also welcome after she's done talking to turn on your audio and video during the Q&A and directly interact and ask any questions that you might have. If this is your first time joining the CDI DataViz group, welcome. We are a USGS-based community data visualization practitioners. The goal here is to just create exposure to a diversity of skills, tools, perspectives, and applications in data visualization. It's our goal as a group to act as a resource for DataViz guidelines and best practices at USGS, as well as create a space to connect with others, engage with data visualization. We're all kind of using DataViz in a different way in our own work. So this is just a space for us to come together and collaborate in that kind of way and get to know each other. So we do this through quarterly webinars, which you're at right now. We've also hosted some workshops in the past. And we run a Teams channel in this theme where you can connect with others and ask any sorts of questions. We, as coordinators, are here to support your work and interest in DataViz. So please don't be shy and feel free to reach out to us if you have any ideas, speakers like you'd like to hear from, or other requests for future events that we can help you facilitate. All right, so now it's time for the live polling. We want to get to know you and who's here today. So go to Sli.do and enter the code DataViz to get into the polls. You can also just use your phone to enter through the QR code here. And then just answer the questions as they appear. I think the link also probably was just shared in the chat or will be shortly. Let's control the, okay. All right, so first question, just like a little icebreaker here, describe your Thanksgiving weekend in one word. This could be a funny one. I think for me, I would say tiring. I see exhausting. Exhausting. I drove all the way from Wisconsin to New York and back, and that on a fast day is 15 hours. So it was a lot.
Ooh, skiing. That sounds fun.
Where's there snow right now?
Yeah, love to know.
Full just took like the everybody ate a lot.
That's good.
Beach.
I wish. Holiday spirit.
Yeah. Contagious. That doesn't sound good.
Uh-oh. Long lost friends. It's great
hopefully
to connect with people.
Finally, like a little break to see family. I might say also add spicy for mine because I tried a bunch of new hot sauces.
Nice. That's fun.
All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, so are there other users of Earth observation data here or remotely sensed data? And if so, what are your go-to data sources? What are you using? Yes, silence. I think around here, yeah, there's a lot of excitement with Landsat 9 going up. One thing I really love is seeing the coverage from the ladies of Landsat on Twitter, and just I think I saw it on the news too. That was really awesome. And if you guys don't know the ladies of Landsat, there's like a Twitter handle and just promoting women in Landsat, which is really awesome. Pretty consistent across the board here. Might be expected since this is probably a largely USGS crowd. All right, well, skipped ahead before a minute, but let's go to the next question. And that is, what sort of mapping tools do you like to use? I know we have a huge mapping contingency at USGS, especially in the DataViz group. So what are you using? Yeah, RSF. I personally am deeply committed to R for all my mapping needs and love that SF package, especially because I'm like a big ggplotter. So having the ability to use that geomsf to make maps is great for me. But ArcGIS also obviously very popular.
I was going to say that one's getting huge. I wonder if they're working primarily in Pro or if they're also integrating their maps and data into like ArcGIS Online applications.
I see a little bit of both.
There's some Python on there. Awesome.
Google Earth Engine.
Neat. UGIS, that's another great one.
All right, it seems like it's slowing down a little bit. Okay, thank you, everybody. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you all to Africa Flores-Anderson. Africa works with NASA Servier. This is a partnership between NASA and USAID that helps developing countries use satellite data to address critical challenges in food security, water resources, climate, land use, and disasters, and using geospatial technology for decision making. And some of this work that Africa has done was highlighted in a video by Science Friday that I watched recently, and I highly recommend if you haven't seen it. It's a part of the series featuring innovative research of women in STEM. And the whole series I actually went into, and it's really awesome. Africa is a Nat Geo Explorer, and in 2020, she received the Geospatial World Award as the Geospatial Woman Champion of the Year. This is for her work to increase the use of Earth observations and inspire women around the world in STEM fields. So congrats on that, Africa. That is inspiring and admirable, and we're really excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let me share my screen. So I think you can see PowerPoint now.
I'm seeing the whole view. Yeah, there you go, the screen share.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction. And today I would like to share some examples. I will have two pilot projects in which I'm working with optical data and also working with radar data. As she mentioned, I work with Servir, which is a partnership between NASA and USAID and leading geospatial organizations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And we work with countries in these regions to co-develop solutions that use air observation and geospatial technologies to address critical needs and challenges related to climate change, food security, water, and water-related disasters, land use, and air quality. This is the extent of the countries that we cover in Servir. In each of these regions where we work, these leading geospatial organizations are the ones who implement Servir. Everything that we do is very needs-driven, and every service that is provided is co-developed with a particular stakeholder that is requesting that particular support. And we have a whole process in which we do this co-development process. We don't do parachute science. We try to do everything in alignment with what the country needs or the institution or organization that is requesting a particular support needs, understanding very well the capabilities that they already have, and the resources that are available, and how we can better contribute working together instead of maybe developing a solution that is only done based in the US and trying to bring it to these regions and push it for the use of something that it may not be what is needed. The other I think a strength or something that is to highlight for Servir is that it's a global network. These leading geospatial organizations together with NASA and USAID are joined by other groups and institutions that make the Servir vision possible. We include the private sector, and there are additional U.S. collaborators that also include USGS, U.S. Forest Service and State Department, and also other international organizations, such as FAO. But there are more. This is a big soup, and I think that this is what makes Servir unique. For the NASA component, we also support a group of applied sciences team that is made up currently of 20 principal investigators that are working alongside the scientists in these regions that I already mentioned to co-develop these different solutions for specific needs. Servir fits into this bridge between science and an end user need. That's where most of our work is. All of our work is very applied, and we try to be that bridge in transitioning between science and an application. And there is a particular way to do that very carefully, and it takes a lot of time. Servir has been active since 2005, and I think that there is no USAID, or there may, but I don't think USAID program that has lasted that long. This is a wonderful partnership that brings the best of all the groups that make Servir possible. So jumping into the applications, I mentioned that everything that we do is very applied. So I will talk about two particular cases. The work that we are doing in Lake Atitlan, that was mainly what was featured in Science Friday, as he mentioned, and also the new work that we are doing with synthetic aperture radar in Servir. So this is Lake Atitlan. It's one of the most beautiful lakes in the world, as I say, with no bias because I am from Guatemala. So very honestly, it is the most beautiful lake in the world. It's just, it's surrounded by volcanoes. It's very well known for its pristine waters. It has, during the dry season, when we have very clear waters, the transparencies can reach 20 meters. So just imagine that like a building of 10 floors of transparency. It's a very deep lake, as at its deepest point is about 300 meters deep. It is the second most visited site in the country. However, in 2009, it suffered from an algae bloom. It was the first and major algae bloom in the lake, and it was a big shock for everyone. We monitored this algae bloom in Servir from beginning to end. The bloom lasted about a month, and it covered at its highest point the 40% of the lake. At that point, like, people knew that an algae bloom was going on in the lake, but we were the first ones to provide the satellite perspective of the extent and how big it was, the bloom. And our analysis made the main page of the most popular newspaper in the country, and it drove action immediately. Guatemala didn't have policy for wastewater management, and because of this event in the most important lake of the country, when this happened and they saw the extent of the damage, they started developing a policy for waste water management. We stay monitoring the lake using multiple satellite resources. At the beginning, when we did the analysis in 2009, it was an empirical analysis, just identifying the extent of the algae bloom, where there was more algae and where there was less algae. And I further my analysis and research in Lake Atitlan using hyperspectral data to develop an algorithm that could use satellite data to derive chlorophyll concentration as a proxy of algae bloom. So we could actually have quantities of how much algae was in the lake. And doing all this analysis, we gain a better understanding of what was going on in the lake, because unfortunately the blooms continue happening in the lake. It started in 2009 and they came back almost every year, and nowadays we have algae blooms almost every year, unfortunately. Something that we identify, when do these algae blooms occur, and it was usually at the end of the rainy season. And at the end of the rainy season, there is not only a lot of sediment that has been carried out to the lake, but also there is a mixing of waters that happen. And through previous studies that have been done in the lake, we know that cyanobacteria is present in the lake. Actually, these blooms are caused by cyanobacteria. The type of cyanobacteria that produces these blooms does not produce toxins. However, this cyanobacteria is associated to microcystis, another cyanobacteria that does produce toxins. And eventually, microcystis very likely is going to overtake the other cyanobacteria species, and it's very likely that in the near future, if this situation continues, the bloom that the algae that produces the bloom is going to be producing toxins, and is going to be even more damaging for the lake. But when we were doing this analysis and gaining understanding of what was going on, is that this original cyanobacteria that produces the bloom survives in the very cold and deep waters of Lake Atitlan during the dry season, and at the end of the rainy season, when the waters mix, it is spread out throughout the lake. And so we have a lot of sediments. We have the cyanobacteria spread throughout the lake, and then it stops raining, so there is more sunlight. And those are all the conditions that contribute for an algae bloom to occur. So we analyze a lot of data, climatic and also Earth observation derived satellite data, to see and to create a model that could forecast when algae blooms were going to occur using artificial intelligence. This is the project that is being supported now by National Geographic and Microsoft, and we developed the model. And I had to say that this project was heavily impacted by COVID, because once we have the model, we need to do a lot of analysis to the data, and some sort of reanalysis to not having a skew model, because even though the blooms are happening more frequently, the lake is still oligotrophic most of the time, which means it's very clean most of the time. It's not like it is always an algae bloom. So we have more no bloom observations than bloom observations. So when you create a model that has very few observations of the type of event that you are trying to predict, it could be skewed to that, and is going to be, the results are going to be, you feed, depending upon what you feed your model, that's what you are going to get. So we had to do some balancing of our data sets, which is when you are doing machine learning and applying artificial intelligence, that's most of the time actually goes in collecting the observations that you are going to fit into your model, to have something that have enough skill and is accurate at the end. But then we had the model, and many of the data sets that we use were deprecated during the pandemic. And we wanted to have an operational system so we can have runs every day and have a probability product that could tell us when there will be algae blooms or not. And then we didn't have all the data sets because they were no longer being produced. And we have to find solutions to find data sets that could be used for the operational system. And that's the process in which we are right now. And it has been delayed because of all of these issues. But this is an animation using planet data just to show you that actually, even though algae blooms are an issue, it doesn't mean that the lake is constantly suffering from algae blooms. Actually, most of the time, the lake is bloom-free, to say in a way. That's the example using optical data, because to monitor water quality, including algae blooms, what we use are optical data sets. However, since everything that we use in Servir is open and free, in 2014, you may have heard that we start getting synthetic aperture radar on the operational basis for free through Copernicus and Sentinel-1. And this was the first time that there was a freely available SAR data set. And what we realized in Servir is that we didn't have the capacity or the expertise to use this information, particularly for forest monitoring and biomass estimation, which is one of the areas where I work, because I lead the portfolio for land cover land use change. And in theory, SAR should be very useful for this particular application. And everything that we found was very research and science oriented, and there were not that many algorithms or examples or applications, like even literature that was addressing how to use our data for a particular application. Everything was very research oriented. And so we joined efforts with Silva Carbon, which is also a program that is part of USGS and US Forest Service that builds the capacity of countries to use air observation data for forest monitoring and MRV systems. And we work together with them to create the SAR handbook, a comprehensive or a compilation of methodologies for forest monitoring and biomass estimation using synthetic aperture radar data. We work with 6 experts that many of them are part of the NISAR team, the upcoming NASA and ISRO mission that is going to be producing L-band data. And also they were part of the Forest Service and academia. And we developed this handbook that is very applied, that covers from how to access the data, how to process it, and how to analyze it for specific applications. The hubs, the Servir hubs, were a key part of the development of this handbook, from identifying the chapters or the topics that were going to be addressed, to also supporting the development of the training materials by hosting trainings in each of the institutions, and then also having a very big role in the editorial process of this applied book. The book covers about 7 chapters that cover, as I mentioned from the very beginning, how to access, process synthetic aperture radar, to how to use it for mangrove mapping, biomass estimation, forest stand height, and forest disturbance. There are some of the few examples. And you can access it all for free in our website. But in addition to that, each of the chapters has the theory that is very applied, but also a training tutorial that covers end-to-end how to use that particular data, a particular data set for that particular application. The SAR handbook has had a global outreach since its release in 2019. It has had it's more than 1 million people have accessed the handbook and the associated materials from over 180 countries. And the response has cover like well beyond the regions that Servir covers. In fact, like one of the main or many of the accesses are coming from Europe and the US. And just to give you an idea, so the power of SAR is that is a cloud penetrating sensor, and when you are looking at a SAR image, what you are looking mostly are changes or the scattering that is coming due to the structure of the surface and the moisture of the surface. They are like the two key parameters that we are measuring with SAR, that is collecting data in the microwave part of the spectrum, of the electromagnetic spectrum. So for biomass applications and land cover mapping, it is very powerful, particularly for biomass, because we are actually measuring a structure in a way. However, the data is tricky, particularly for all of us that are used to work with optical data. And most of the community comes from working with optical data. So when you see a SAR image, your first impression is going to be, honestly, disappointment, because it's very speckled, and you cannot create a natural color image because it's a different part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and then it's so speckled. So the pre-processing is key. You need to be working with the right product. However, the power of the data is amazing once you know how to process it very well. And here we can see an animation in the Amazonia. It's for the same time period. On the left, you have the Sentinel-1 imagery, and on the right, you have the Sentinel-2 optical data. And you can see everything that is going on, all the seasonal flooding in the Amazon on the Sentinel data. And for that same time period, you cannot capture all of that information with the, I'm sorry, Sentinel-2. And the title over there is wrong. I'm sorry, that's Sentinel-2 on the right, which is the optical data set. Here is something similar where you can see everything that is going on for the water there, and how it looks with the optical observation on the right. So we have several services in Servir that are using Sentinel-1 data for mapping water, whether it's flooding or just water in general. The signature of water in SAR data is very strong and clear, because the information that you get in a SAR image is coming from the different scatters on the surface, and they can be broadly classified in three categories: surface scattering, volumetric scattering, and double bouncing. For the water, we usually get surface scattering, so the signal is very low, because when the sensor sends the signal and touches something that is relatively flat, that energy is going to get dissipated or absorbed. And what goes back to the sensor, which is what we measure in the image, is that value is going to be very low. So it's very easy to detect that in synthetic aperture radar information. For forest, what we get, most of the scattering comes from volumetric scattering, particularly for the broadleaf forest, because when the signal comes, it touches leaves, branches, and it goes everywhere. So maybe some energy goes back as stronger, other goes lower, and it's very speckled but very consistent. And what you get there is volumetric scattering. Double bouncing happens when the signal that goes back to the sensor is stronger, and that usually happens when you have very hard edges like buildings or the standing trees with no leaves, and the signal, so you have something that is flat and something that is standing with very hard edges. So the signals can touch something that is flat, get dissipated, but it bounces with something that is perpendicular, and what goes back to the sensor is the addition of those vectors, so it's very strong. And that's how a SAR image is created. So there are some things that are going to be harder to detect than others, and we had to calibrate our eyes, maybe also our brains, because with optical data, we are used to be guided by the colors, and with SAR data, it will be very different. And also, what you are looking in these SAR animations are already a decomposition, and that is called Freeman decomposition, is what Alaska Satellite Facility uses as a default product. And that particular decomposition is meant to highlight water or surface scattering in this case. So that's how you see the changes in water, but here you can also see an animation of deforestation in the Amazon. And I also wanted to highlight the importance of the pre-processing of the SAR data, because it can be very frustrating. But it's just because we are used to use with optical data. I am guilty of that. For people that are used to work with SAR, is not frustrating. It's like that's the data, and we are used to work with it. And now I'm getting to that point eventually. But here on the left, you can see the same Freeman decomposition, but it doesn't have a filter, a speckle filter. And here you can see this animation for the same area with the leaf filter, that is a speckle filter, where you can see more clearly what is going on, and you can even see some of the fires that are going on here in the Amazon. But that's how deforestation will look in general terms. In terms of algorithms, I mentioned the SAR handbook, that each of the chapters have theory and have a training tutorial. One of the chapters is devoted to deforestation and forest degradation, and it includes a training tutorial covering the change point detection algorithm, which is the algorithm that NISAR is going to use for the disturbance product. So you can already access that algorithm and open the Jupyter notebook and run it there, and it's using a time series data set to detect change. For change detection, I think that the time series of SAR data is very powerful, and you already have that algorithm that is freely available for anyone to use and run it. So I think that's all that I have for today. We have many services and many more applications. I just wanted to provide a quick look of some of the things that we are doing at Servir and the innovative ways in which we are using the data to address solutions. Something that I forgot to mention is that all of our services are needs driven, but what we are after is an impact on the ground and empower those who are at the forefront of addressing these environmental issues. And that's why I call the presentation for a sustainable future, because I think that that's the solution for everything. We need to work together with the people who are at the forefront of these environmental issues and empower them to use satellite data or whatever resources they need. We happen to work with satellite data, so that's where I focus, to address those critical challenges. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Everyone wants to unmute and just join me in giving Africa like a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you. Awesome. So now we have some time for Q&A. Oh, Dion, I'll let you take it from here. Sorry.
Sure, yeah. Hey, everyone. This is Dion Zawani with USGS Cloud Hosting Solutions. Africa, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go ahead and get us started with today's Q&A. So folks, feel free to either unmute, raise your hand. You can turn on your camera if you want to, no pressure though, or type your question in the chat and we'll get going. You can go ahead and kick us off for sure.
Okay, my question is just like in your time browsing Earth observation data, like, what is the coolest or most memorable or unexpected things that you've seen?
That's a very good question. And maybe many things, like, but something that really keeps me in awe. Well, first, I study natural resources, so I did a lot of work with particularly forests and walking through the forest to measure trees and biomass and just walking through the forest and then bringing all this information and create my own maps. And then I saw a satellite image and I could see everything and estimate things so fast, not to disregard the importance of in situ data, because everything that we do with satellite data still needs to be calibrated and validated with in situ observations. But despite of that, the fact that I could see just the extent of the forest and the health of the forest of a large area so easily and fast was for me an eye-opening and something that kept me in the field and kept me interested to keep working with satellite data, because you can have such a good assessment and very fast using this type of data set that otherwise it's just very difficult if you are just relying with observation on the grounds. And I just remember suffering through those very long walks just to see a plot of forest that was being reforested, and it was like just very extenuating. And then like just seeing that you can see the same things from an image is very nice. Yeah.
Great. We do have a couple questions in the chat. What tools do you and your team primarily use for pre-processing the SAR data?
Yeah, right now the optimal product to use for ecosystem applications is RTC, the radiometric terrain correction product. So that's the best product for RTC is produced through Gamma, which is a commercial software. So we get it from ASF because the Alaska Satellite Facility DAC that hosts all the NASA data. So you can go to that DAC, which is in Vertex, and I can put the link in the chat. That's the best way to pre-process the SAR data. The problem with SAR is the volume of the data. It's just very difficult. But we get the RTC from ASF and we upload it to GEE. I use a lot of GEE. In fact, the animations that I show with the SAR data are through GEE. But a caveat there is that what we are using is the GRD product. GEE is not hosting RTCs at the moment because RTCs are not being generated on the operational basis. They are on demand. You have to go to the NASA DAC, request it on demand, and you will get it for free, as many as you want. But then you have to download them or upload them on a platform to do the analysis, to apply your own algorithm. But I would just recommend for all of you that are interested to use our data to visit the Alaska Satellite Facilities site and request RTCs from there and look at that product, because as I mentioned, this is very true. When you see a SAR image, it's very hard, particularly if you are an optical person or has been working with optical data. Because it's very speckled and just a pain. It's a pain, but it's very good and very powerful when you start understanding how it works and all those basic principles. They have very good documentation, tutorials about how to use the platform and how to request the RTCs. You can apply the speckle filter that I mentioned that's there. So when you get your product, it is going to be already filtered. It makes a difference, a big difference. And let me just put the.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we definitely appreciate any links and resources you have. Can you access the chat? Sometimes it's finicky.
I think I do. Let's see.
If not, you can always just send it to you or myself.
Oh yes, yes, yeah, I see. Yes, I can see it. I'm going to put it there.
Awesome. All right, the next question is, I'm really interested in your forecasting efforts. One thing we think a lot about with using satellite data is the lag between observation and getting the process data in hand to be used in a model. Is this something that Servier works toward, reducing the time from satellite to end user in order to enable the use of remotely sensed data in real-time decision making?
Yes, thank you. Well, we use with what is already available out there. So any lag time that comes with the information, that's what we will need to deal with. We don't have that much bandwidth to or the mandate or anything to reduce that lag time on between the satellite observation and when it gets to the hands of the user, though. One of the things is that some of these hubs have acquired MODIS antennas because they do care about the or need, depending upon what they are working on the acquisition time and getting the information as soon as possible. So for MODIS and BIRS data, they have acquired some MODIS antennas that address that particular issue.
Great. Does anyone else have any other questions? Again, feel free to unmute or raise your hand.
I had a question, sort of, this is maybe outside of the scope of your work, but I kept thinking like, I feel like it seems like the algal bloom is like preventable. Do y'all know where the extra sediment is coming from and like why that's happening?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Yes, so when we did our analysis, one of the variables that has the more skill of power, it was runoff, actually. And this is an endorheic watershed, so it's a watershed that is surrounded by volcanoes, and there is a lot of topography, as you can imagine, and the land is not suitable for agriculture. However, land is being used for agriculture, and when you have agriculture in this type of soil, you have to use a lot of fertilizers to be able to produce something. And then when you have rain, and there is going to be a lot of sedimentation, particularly if you are not applying soil protective practices and you're applying agriculture, it's just going to happen. But people need to eat. And I think that one of the immediate solution, it has to be a holistic solution to start with, to apply soil protective practices in all the agricultural areas, and try not to plant in those areas that are not suitable for crops. In addition to that, most of the towns around the lake, and the towns are located around the lake, most of them they throw their wastewater directly to the lake. That's also a source of pollution for the and nutrients for the algae as well. But due to the topography, it's very expensive to build plants, wastewater treatment plants for wastewater. They had to be a lot of very small plants because there is not enough space to build one big waste water treatment plant. And that needs investment. That's one of the immediate solutions. Well, like it's not going to solve everything because sedimentation is going to still happening if there is not a good management of the soil in the watershed. But that's something that logically should occur. But there are a lot of politics involved and resources needed to build those plants, those treatment plants. But yes, definitely it's preventable. It just has to be a very holistic approach for it. And those will be the main two things I think that they will need to address.
All right. Any other questions before we move on? We got one, another comment that says, I like that Servier is very applied and works closely with users to produce user-relevant data and products. Do most Servier users have science and tech background sufficient to interpret the data? If not, what kind of user testing do you do to explore how to present the information? Good question.
Yeah, usually they do. Usually we partner with government institutions. They are not the only stakeholders, but we partner with those groups, organizations that had the mandate to monitor that particular service that we are talking about, whether it's water, forest, or the agriculture. And usually they are already doing something in their country, and we just complement their effort with satellite data. Usually, not all the times, but sometimes they are not using air observation data for their analysis. And that's the type of expertise that we bring. That would used to be the past, I think so, because nowadays almost everyone is using satellite data since the Landsat archive became open, and they had been gaining also more the expertise on it. So they always bring a unique perspective and knowledge to the collaboration. But yes, most of them have already science expertise. Maybe most of the time maybe better than ours for that particular issue that we are trying to address.
The next question is, what is the future of satellite imagery for you and in your work? For you, what environmental problems are being addressed or will be addressed through Earth observation approaches?
Good question. Yeah, I think that the future of satellite data is amazing right now. I'm very excited because we have never had that much information as we have right now, and it's just looking better and better because for example, now we can combine Sentinel-2 with Landsat, and it will be Landsat 8 and Landsat 9. So the revisit time for a given spot on Earth has reduced significantly. Almost daily, we will have an observation. Even with Planet, we already have daily observations at high resolution that now are freely available for the tropics. Well, at least the monthly mosaics. But the thing is that I think that we can fairly say that we have observations on the daily basis now with all the information that we have. I think that the future is time series analysis for optical and for SAR data. And we were just discussing this before this meeting. The future is the cloud as well. The data volumes are too much to handle on premise. It's just impossible. So many of the algorithms for land cover change are based on time series. And that's, I think, that where Google Earth Engine has grown and built a lot of skill and strength because those algorithms are there. But they are not only there. I think we also have to find other solutions of cloud providers. But the thing is that we need to be working with all the stream of data, all the historical data. And for Landsat, we have consistent observations since the 70s, working on the same spectral wavelengths. It's just amazing what we can do, but we need to process the data in a different way in time series. and the volume is just too much to do it on premise. Like there is no one computer that I have, like I can buy or maintain, that is going to have that capability to process that much information. With SAR, each image is gigantic. So I think that that community is already used to work with large volumes of data. So they have take advantage of the cloud as well. And I think that that's the future of satellite information, the cloud time series analysis. And in terms of environmental issues, I will say the water quality. And maybe I'm also biased because that's one of the topics that I'm working on, but I think that that's also something of key relevance, and for something that there is a lot of uncertainty at the moment is biomass estimation as well, because it's not that easy to derive with satellite observations. But I think that with all these sorts of data sets that we have, that includes synthetic aperture radar, and we also have LiDAR observation from space, we can get more accurate information on that topic too. As far as you have data, see how far can you go for time series analysis? Yes, as far, and that's like the optical community working on land cover change is using, there are a number of time series algorithms available that include like land trenders, CCDC, and many others. But usually we can calibrate our algorithm with a chunk of the data just to see how things work, and then use the new observations to see how things are changing when you calibrate and you observe with the others.
Great. Well, you already answered my question. I was going to ask if you had been looking towards the cloud for any of your analysis or processing and storage needs. Anyone else have any other questions? Thought I saw someone come off mute, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, is this working? I don't know where the microphone is in my computer. Okay. Sorry, I was trying to type this, but it's really a choppy question, so I'm sorry that it's a half thought. There was an awesome talk, and I really loved those two projects that you presented. But it struck me that there's like some cross-pollination that can happen between like the applications that you demonstrated, as well as like the basic research, so like forest science and limnology. And I guess what I'm wondering is like those basic sciences tend to have different trainings involved with them. And so like it's always like usually pretty apparent for me to see the applied sciences, but have you noticed how remote sensing can be used to also investigate those basic research questions? Like, because I come from like an aquatic ecology background, and I was like, oh, ligotrophic lake, cyanobacteria blooms, that's such a cool basic ecology question, but I haven't seen that as much in the literature. And I'm just wondering if you could, sorry for that long question, but I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I love it, and I attest that is true. Like usually scientists that address very research-oriented topics have a different type of training, we'll say in a way, or approach in general to transition to science. So through Servir, because it is a program that is supported by NASA, we do try to fit into RNA. And one of our program managers, Dr. Nancy Serby, she leads the capacity building program in NASA, which Servir is part of, is very conscientious and always trying to make this connection with the other applied sciences programs in NASA and RNA. But I don't know, I think that we are starting to figure out that one of the things that we also try to inform from the applied community, and Servir is like maybe the most applied program that NASA has, is the development, the not to inform, but the decadal survey. The decadal survey informs the missions that are going to be launched in the next 10 years. And what we have been trying to do is to include people from the applied community around the world in the early adopters programs of the missions, and also inform the decadal survey, which is a long process, but by having these connections and including the feedback that eventually is going to be included at some point in the next decadal survey may be the best. I think that informing the main questions, as you said, is something that is needed. I don't know how good or bad we are doing it, but we are trying for sure. And I have to say that it takes a particular special scientist to be part of Servir, because you have to be very oriented to serving, or like a very it's like a different type of set of mind. And not to say that a scientist that doesn't have that set of mind is wrong, because sometimes you have to wait a long time for something to happen, that you have to take into account many components and factors and wait on people, and maybe time and luxuries that other scientists say, like, no, I'm just going to do my stuff because I need to publish, and I need my, and I have my question, and I may be able to get some data somewhere else. And it's valid too, but we try to do it in a different way, designing Servir as applied as possible. I'm very respectful of what the countries and the scientists in those regions are already doing, because if we want our products and data to be used, we understand and we learn very well that it has to be something useful. And how do we know if it's useful or not? So we spend a lot of time understanding what they need and not what we have. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. Again, feel free to come off mute or raise your hand. All right, I think we can go ahead and close out the Q&A. Let's all unmute one more time and give Africa another round.
Thank you.
I muted myself to applaud you. Thank you so much, and I will go ahead and hand it off to Katie for some announcements.
Thank you, Dion. Hey, everyone. My name is Katie. I work for the USGS New England Water Science Center, and I am one of the organizers of this collaboration area. So I'm going to update you with a few of our announcements. Nominations are currently open from now until December 21st of this year for the internal USGS Shoemaker Award for Communication Product Excellence. And this award recognizes information products that excel in communicating complex scientific concepts to internal or external non-technical audiences. For more information, check out the post about this in our Microsoft team, and a link for this will also be placed in the meeting chat. And of course, if you haven't already checked out our Microsoft team, then we highly encourage you to do so. More information about how to join the team can be found on our Confluence Wiki under the How We Connect section. The links to join our team, as well as the link to our Confluence Wiki, will also be placed in the meeting chat. Lastly, one of our organizers, Ellen Betchel, has left the USGS to pursue a new position. We want to say thank you to Ellen for your valuable contributions and enthusiasm. We will miss you greatly. That being said, we are always looking for help coordinating events and are interested in working with you. If you have any ideas or DataViz themed events that you would like to help facilitate, then please contact one of the organizers. This contact information can be found on our Confluence Wiki page. All right, that wraps up announcements. Back to you, Dion.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, again, please join us on the CDI DataViz Microsoft team. Once you've joined, tell us a little bit about yourself on the meet and greet channel and post one of your favorite visualizations. We're always happy to meet new people and see what you guys are working on. We have recorded today's webinar and it will be shared through the listserv and posted to Teams as well as our Collaboration Area's wiki page. So you'll be notified via those channels when those are ready to go. And then finally, we encourage those of you, again, who are passionate to join us. Contribute your ideas and perspectives as we plan our quarterly webinars. Next slide, please. With that, the organizers and I want to thank everyone for joining today. A huge thank you again to Africa for the great presentation and very lively Q&A session. Like we've done in the past, the planning team, we'll be sticking around for a few minutes to hang out and just chat about the content today, what folks are working on, or any ideas for future webinars. So feel free to stick around and mute and turn on your video if you'd like. We're excited to meet you and hear what you're working on. So we'll stick around. Thanks again, Africa. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. The same goes to the rest of you, and we'll see you all in the new year.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Have a nice rest of the day. Bye.
Yeah.